Michael Perez, welcome to Tell Me a Story. Thanks so much for joining me today.
The pleasure is absolutely mine. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's funny because you're the first person that I've had on the show who I know the least about and have spent the least amount of time with. So this will definitely be an exploratory conversation. Before we hear your story, can you introduce yourself?
Of course, of course. My name is Michael Perez. I often go by Mikey Perez. And so my journey started out, well, I guess my self-exploration started out in as early as elementary school when I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I was given Ritalin, the strongest dose possible. And that kind of set me on this self-exploration journey. And before I knew it, I kind of adopted my own set of tools and skills to survive in the real world from elementary school all the way to post-college. And I think it's those hidden gems that kind of serve as the underpinning to my philosophy and how I run my work and companies and whatnot. My background is in computer science and mathematics, and I run and operate a handful of startups. And I guess that would be it.
And you're also a journalist and like a whole bunch of other interesting things, but we can stick with
Correct.
that intro for now. Otherwise, that would be the whole story, I guess. Okay, so you mentioned to me that you want to dive a little bit more into kind of the ADHD diagnosis and whatnot. So let's hear it. Tell me your story.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to talk too much about ADHD, but I think the abstract point and takeaway that I think your listeners can take from this is that you can, life gives you a set of cards, and it's not about whether you hit it lucky or not, but it's about taking what you have and finding silver linings and building on those and building your life around them. So you don't necessarily have to have ADHD. It can be any learning disability or any childhood setback, but if you find a way to weaponize it, it can give you a very strong uniqueness factor. And so for those listening, it's really not just about ADHD. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, so I did start off with ADHD. I was prescribed with the strongest prescription of Ritalin at the time. I think it was
How old are you?
120. I was assessed very early on. I think 8 or 9 years old.
And what made your
Uh,
parents get you, test you?
it's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was clear that I was struggling as a kid, and I was put into like special ed. It was called GEM, and I grew up in a very Orthodox Jewish community. So
Mm.
I was in the yeshiva system, for those who know what that is. And I think as part of an assessment of going into the special ed process, I was assessed, and I was quickly diagnosed with ADHD. And the Ritalin at the time was the drug of choice, and it had absolutely horrible side effects on me. We're talking heart palpitations. I was constantly cold. I had zero appetite. I was almost robotic.
When you were so
Uh,
little, too.
Correct, correct. And they tried to move me from regular Ritalin to slow release, and then we didn't have really that many options at the time. But whatever it was, it seemed like I had to have been on the medication. And there was also a stigma that came with it. I mean, the secretary in my school had to kind of make sure I was taking it.
Mm.
So and the secretary and the actual like the school's office was right in the hallway where everyone would walk by between classes. So it was always like, hey, that's that guy who takes that pill, right? As kids,
Yeah.
no one really knows exactly what it is.
Yeah, it feels like
And
now everyone and their dog has, takes ADHD medication, but when you were a kid, it must
correct.
have been a little bit different.
Correct. And it was also when the teacher came in to teach math or when the teacher came in to teach English, I had to leave the room and go to the special class, I guess for the stupid kids kind of thing.
Mm.
And yeah, as a kid, you don't really understand the world around you, and it kind of hits you hard. But um, so that's pretty much how it was for English and math. I remember I would go into special ed. Even for Hebrew learning at the time, I would go to special ed, and that's pretty much how life was. But the side effects were really bad, and I think as I got older, the side effects got even worse.
So you kept
Or
taking it despite the side effects? Sorry for all the questions.
yeah, of course. Yes, I did. And they tried lowering the dose and switching up the types of from slow release to just back to regular. They tried all different sorts of stuff. And at some points they thought I might be making it up. So they put it
Mm.
in my food, and then I would still complain that I didn't feel good. And then they're like, okay, he's not lying. Um,
The scientific method.
yeah. And I think they tried to weaken my dose, but whatever it was, it definitely wasn't fun. But here's, again, that silver lining. When it worked, it worked. It was like shooting darts in the dark, but you sometimes hit that bullseye. And what was so magical about that bullseye was that it served as a frame of reference. It's like, oh, this is what it's like to focus, and this is what it's like to kind of block out all that noise and to hone in on a task and just get it done.
Mm.
And it was a unique feeling. It wasn't a feeling that I was capable of feeling organically or naturally. But even if the medication wasn't working for me, at least I knew what it meant to have a goalpost, to have something to aim towards. And I think that was the biggest blessing in disguise, where as I started to wean off it, I kind of knew what I had to work towards. And if you think about it in the schooling system, especially as you start early on, and I'm not criticizing it because I'm not here to propose. I can't think of a much better solution, maybe incrementally with a lot of optimization. But there's a bureaucratic schooling system where you dump kids in a class by age, and the curriculum is really broad, and you're teaching everyone the basics. And as they kind of excel in life, they can hone in and they can target a specific discipline or domain of expertise. So I wasn't really doing things I loved doing. I was just doing really broad courses, as every kid does. And I think with people with ADHD, uh, they're really bad at doing things. This is the case with everyone, but I think it's compounded with people with ADHD, where you're really bad at things you don't like, and you become very good at things you do like.
Mm.
Because you find a way to get things done. When you like something, you're not necessarily that noise naturally is a little weaker because you have an excitement to focus in, and that becomes addictive because you don't get that in many other places.
Can you
And
try, as someone who doesn't think she has ADHD, can you try to explain it to me, I guess, or, from, 7-year-old you, what it was like to,
yeah, I mean, just what do you hate doing? Like, what do you absolutely hate doing? Maybe like accounting, bookkeeping,
um,
your taxes.
I hate logistics. Like I hate finding a time and date that works for me and other people.
Okay, so think of your full-time jobs was finding logistics, and not even for yourself, for someone else.
Yeah, no, I'm out.
Right, but you had to do it because everyone around you told you that that's what you needed to do. Because everyone above you is same way we somehow look at doctors nowadays, is that somehow they know best when they give us advice. That's our we look at our parents, and if our parents tell you you got to do logistics for this guy who you don't know for every day for 3 4 hours a day, you wouldn't be very good at it, right? You constantly need to find weird, quirky ways to motivate yourself, which would be very short lived. And I guess that's how it'll be with someone with ADHD, where you have that compounded effect. But when you find something you like doing, it's really fun, and you become really good at it. So as I started now transitioning from elementary to high school, this is where I started to pick up on a few things. And I think there was more of like an epiphany. It was more of like an epiphany. There was a certain moment where I got that inflection point, and I realized there's something here I want to dig deeper on. Where I think we were doing just like basic parabolic equations in high school, and I asked a question about extreme conditions so I can better understand, you know, what the teacher was teaching. And someone in the class said, "Mikey, why are you asking this? It's so stupid. Like just like you're making things needlessly complicated." And then from there, I kind of had like a switch. I'm like, I'm not making things needlessly complicated. I think understanding these extreme conditions will help me understand the entire system as a whole with a certain level of insight. And I realized maybe there's a little bit of depth here that I want to dig further upon and learn who I am and feel comfortable who I am. And um, even though I might be classified as a special ed as a kid, it's maybe just you know, my place is not here. I just need to go
Mm.
through this transition of elementary, high school, and as I excel further and further, I think that uniqueness factor will become something that I can leverage more effectively.
You
And that's a
identified that at like 16, 15?
yeah, because I realized that like he was telling me something that I understood what he was telling me, but I don't think he understood what I was trying to tell him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I realized that I'm trying to explain this, but I'm looking down at the situation, not up. Like, and
What do you
I
mean?
think that meaning he wasn't teaching me something. I realized that like I understood he was telling me like I understand why it's not important to understand how this parabolic equation exists, you know, when at infinity or at zero at these extreme conditions, and uh, he was telling me I'm being needlessly complicated. I'm like, no, I understand why I need to do this for me to
Mm.
properly understand parabolic equations. I can't remember what the specific nuance was at the
Right.
time,
You
but
saw beyond
um,
like his point of view,
yeah, I
basically.
realized there was an element of depth that I was encroaching upon that he just wasn't grasping, and I realized, but I'm the one who's supposed to be bad at math, right? And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then I realized that we're all unique in our own set of ways, and I just want to point out that I ended up majoring in math,
Right.
and I ended
So
up
that must have been the thing
doing a
that
lot of
excited
writing.
you. Yeah,
It's the
motivating you.
irony. It's the things I was told that I was the worst at were the things that I actually found that I
How's your
was
Hebrew
fell in love
though?
with. אביק שלי טוב, ההורים שלי ישראלים, אז כן. Um, כן. I speak a few languages. I speak French as well. But um, so yeah, high school was where I started to like open up my eyes, and I started to realize things that I thought I hated were maybe the things I liked. And to be honest, I didn't fall in love with math till way later on, but I think just that the basic course is the most logical stuff you teach in school. In a high school, there's a bit of chemistry and math, and we didn't do bio. But anyways, when I graduated high school, I mean, I went through the yeshiva system. So for those who
Can
don't
you
know what that
explain that
is,
a little? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's an extremely orthodox. Uh, it's a school for Orthodox Judaism, and there's an extreme focus and a high focus on Hebrew studies with minimal requirements to push you through the secular system. So you're really not learning much math. You're not learning much English. And it's designed that way so they can probably meet the legal criteria for the government and still operate the Jewish school. That's kind of what it feels like to some extent. I mean,
Definitely from the
I'm not
inside.
necessarily saying that's their motivation, but because they're trying to prepare you for life, and in their value system, life would be going into the Jewish system. They're not necessarily preparing you to become an engineer or a scientist. And where it really all hit me was when I graduated and I'm being thrown into college at the time. And I started off in computer science. So that was the first degree I
So
kind of,
hold on, just to
yes,
set the scene a little more. So you went to a yeshiva, which, as we know, is this very religious institution. Often, young men who go to yeshiva don't necessarily go to college at all, right? They'll go
no,
into deeper Torah studies. So how did you get
correct,
to college? Why was that your
correct.
path?
Uh, I never really fully immersed myself in the Jewish system. And I always loved computers, and I thank you for asking that question. I mean, there's probably a small part of the story here I might have been glossing over, where even as a kid I was fixing computers. That's kind of where my sanctuary was, my room, and I was doing nothing but repairing computers. And in fact, my school hired me to repair all their computers, and then the girls' school was called Beis Yaakov. Was like so the guys all went to one school and the girls in our community all went to another school, and I had like access to the girls' school because I was fixing all their computers as
Oh
well.
wow, you were the lucky
Yeah.
guy who got
Yeah, I
to.
was like the only guy walking into that premises of like that was 15, 16 years old.
Palms
And I was
sweating.
fixing like yeah, I was fixing like 400 computers a year between both schools, maybe a little less, but between my community, I was fixing way more. So everyone
I
was
think
like
they call that
bringing their
child
lap.
labor, Michael.
Well, I know. I honestly loved it. No, it was voluntary child's labor. They actually paid me decently well, and it gave me confidence. I was able to take care of myself at a young age. I understood the concept of working hard, making money, and I truly enjoyed it. So that was kind of something I started prodding upon, and then I started building up my own savings, building up my own independence, and having your own independence makes pulling away from a structure that you're not in love with, necessarily the Jewish upbringing. As much as I love my Jewish heritage, the schooling itself wasn't necessarily a place for me. And the fact that I had my own finances allowed me to kind of operate independently to some capacity.
And your
So,
parents didn't mind that you went off to college?
no, they supported it. So the thing about the Jewish system, the religious system, is sometimes if you kind of pull yourself out of it, you end up doing drugs and whatnot, or partying a lot, just because you don't really have the tools to survive outside of it. And here
You
I
like
started building
swing
out.
all the way to the other side, basically.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of a binary situation. You're either in the system, and if you're not, you really, it's hard to find success outside of it because you're not prepared for it. You're not this. Your upbringing is not designed to prepare you for that. It's designed to prepare you to stay within the Jewish system. So, uh, I thankfully had something to kind of ease my way into it, and having a bit of finances, having a bit of a technical background, literally building computers left and right. Um, Gave me some technical knowledge. And when I went into computer science, I actually thought computer science would be kind of what I'm doing. Hey, this is how you build a computer. This is what RAM is. This is what CPU is. And this is how you kind of put it all together. And I was very surprised because I was dealing with the intangible aspect of computers. So I spent my life doing the hardwares, the physical stuff, the stuff you can hold in your hand. But computer science was more of the zeros and ones, things that are all just imaginary.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, wow, there's so much I don't know. I was like, in fact, I know absolutely nothing about anything. And even more so, I started realizing how now I'm in a more competitive landscape where I'm with people who didn't go in the Jewish system.
Are you wearing like a kippah still? Like, what's your religious
Not right now. I do wear a kippah
exterior at this
about like
point?
60% of the time.
In
We can
university,
get
you were
into that.
like, okay,
Oh no,
sorry, I'm just trying to
no,
set the
no.
scene.
Yes, of course, of course. So now I'm happy to. It's kind of we're going through the timeline here, but at the time,
Yeah.
uh, I spent a year in Israel in between. So I did yeshiva in Israel, and that to me was very insightful because I got kind of completely out of the system, and I wasn't really in yeshiva then, and I wouldn't say I was wearing a kippah then. Maybe just during Hebrew class I was, but when I was going out, I definitely wasn't. And in Dawson, I definitely wasn't. In college, I
Okay.
definitely wasn't.
Okay.
In
Got it.
fact, we'll get to that point in just a split second because yeah, it is relevant. And thank you for asking. But I started realizing that once I kind of thrown myself into the more of a competitive landscape, I realized how far behind I am because I'm here just like doing basic algebra and geometry from high school. And then I met a kid, well, I guess a colleague of mine who was about a year or two younger than me. So he was like 16, 17. He was Jewish too, but different, very different kind of Jewish. I mean, he wasn't in the Jewish system whatsoever. And he understood calculus one, calculus two, then multivariable calculus, and he understood physics, electricity, mechanics, and he understood how these different, not only did he just know these topics in the most impressive way, but he was connecting them between courses. So he was explaining me proofs and he was applying the calculus proof to physics. And I was struggling because I was doing Cal 1, I was doing pre-calc at the time. And then I'm like, hey, can you teach me this stuff? And I started paying him. So on
Mm.
Shabbat, when I was pretending I was going to my friend's house on a Saturday when you weren't really allowed to do much in the sense that it's just so it's a religious day and you pretty much pray, eat, and sleep. I was hiding my clothes on a Friday afternoon at the park in a bag under a tree, and then I would leave the house, take the clothes, go to a Starbucks, change so I didn't look, like a white shirt, black pants, and then I'll spend the whole day studying math with this guy.
Wait, so you were
And I was
living
using
with your parents at this time. That's why you're hiding
yes,
the clothes. Okay, because
correct,
otherwise,
correct,
okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm with you.
correct. Yes. So thank you for now helping me navigate the ADHD. But
We've all been there.
and
The clothes under the bench. I know it. Throwing on a pair of jeans instead of the knee-length skirt. I also
eg-
grew up fairly religious, so.
exactly, exactly. And I was lying to my parents so that I can do math, and I was using my savings to pay him, and he taught me everything. And this is where kind of a few things dawned upon me. First of all, I realized how much I can learn in such a short period of time. That was so important. It's that feeling, that addiction you get from having hyper growth. And because listen, I had exams coming up, and when you're struggling with algebra and the teacher's teaching concepts in calculus, it's like trying to learn a course when you don't know the language very well. Your brain is constantly processing the language, and you don't even have enough time to internalize the concepts. My brain is trying to process the algebra where I can't even, or I'm trying, and I need to be internalizing the calculus.
Hmm.
So class wasn't working for me, but I had exams coming, so I needed to get this done really quickly. And that, I think right there, that became addictive. That that growth in that delta, that rate of change in knowledge at such a short period of time truly became addictive to me. And I also realized just how far behind I was. And I started realizing that this is kind of something I might fall in love with. Anyways, I
Are
only
you
did
still
these.
taking Ritalin at this time in the story?
Yes, a lot less, but yes, I definitely am.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would take it at times that like if I would take it like on the Saturday, and I would take like a half a dose, but I wasn't taking it every day religiously like I was before.
Is it the kind of drug that like you can take it once and it'll work for the day? It doesn't like you don't need
Yes,
time for it
especially
to.
if you
Okay.
take slow release at around 9, it starts to wear off at around 3, 4, 5. And you
Okay, got
know
it.
the moment it's wearing off because your body's like, "Hello, buddy, I'm starving." Right? And it's like you have no idea that you're hungry throughout the entire day. And it's actually
Huh.
prescribed today as a weight loss drug. Uh,
Really? Oh.
yeah, people take it to lose weight. So, yeah, and then I realized that first of all, I don't need to go to class to get good grades. In fact, it's all noise. I have to keep up with the pace of the class, whether it's too fast or too slow. And here I'm just looking at notes, and courses like calculus are pretty streamlined across schools. So, look at the syllabus, there's the courses there, and the good teachers are really intelligent about how they map the syllabus to their exams. And you start looking, and everything else is noise, but you start focusing on the actual problems, and you see how two problems are similar with slightly different. You see how the teacher's trying to teach you a slightly varied, a varying concept. It really helped me focus on what's important to get good
Keep
grades.
talking. I'm just getting my ring light because it's getting darker and
Yeah,
darker. But yeah, go
of
on.
course, no worries, no worries, no worries. So that to me was something that I found really interesting. So I'm like, hey, I can learn a lot in a short period of time. I don't necessarily need to go to class. And everyone says you have to go to class. And I'm starting to realize that, hey, I can start building my life off this well worn path. And I kept building on those kind of abstract concepts to the point where I stopped going to class entirely and I started learning everything on my own. And I started realizing how much I could learn on my own when I stopped needing this individual specifically, but he helped me tremendously. He really gave me a window into this outside world.
What's his
And I'm like, this
name?
guy, his name is Simon. Simon, my good old friend. Um, and yes, so that's pretty much how. And at some point, they made me like sign a piece of paper that I would stay in class because I was like literally living somewhere else. Like I was spending time somewhere else, and I was just coming back home for the exams. And in college, they were a little stricter, but in college, in university, well, college in Canada has a slightly different meaning than college in the United States. And then with college in the United States, they don't care, especially. So then I graduated, and I worked for one employer. It's okay. I think I might have lost you partly. Take your time. No worries. No worries.
Um, you know what? I'm gonna take this.
Oh wow, that photo of me on host, that is
Can't
ridiculous.
see it. Don't worry. I don't know what it is.
No, it's okay. Oh, I'm just not wearing a
Oh.
shirt, but it was like when I turned it on my own.
Okay,
That is
let's try
ridiculous. Why would
this.
they? I'll just cut this out. Don't worry about it.
Yikes.
Really? You don't see that photo? That's so weird. Why would they put that? Because it's like the first thing I clicked when I
Oh
opened it.
no, I don't see it. Okay, my lighting's terrible, but it is what it is. Uh,
It's okay. It really is
all
okay.
right. Sorry, back
Um,
to you. I'm with
okay.
you.
Yeah, so what was I saying? I was saying, yeah, so I finished college, computer science, and then I had one employer. And that's when I realized, you're addicted to that that rate of change, that growth in knowledge, and doing the same monotonic stuff, and also working towards someone else's dreams and not building your own. Where that ADHD factor kind of stepped in, where I was like, I was maybe doing good at the job, but I wasn't in love with it. Then I went back to school and I did mathematics. And in fact, I would say in retrospect, math helped me more for computer science than computer science ever did. Computer science gave me more of the hands-on practical application, but mathematics gave me that underpinning concept. Think of like math being one layer deeper, where it's like you take like you're learning a new concept, calculus, and there's like 10 problems where each problem kind of builds on the next, and then the last problem is like the hardest one, and if you can do the last one, like you've got the idea
Hmm.
perfectly. uh like think of like starting with the last problem, and spending 3 4 hours, but you get it, and then everything else just seems super simple. I would say computer science, you can be really good at computer science and not know math whatsoever. But to be honest, all of math, all the computer science constructs, if you look at a function, anytime you dig beneath the beneath the surface, it's all mathematical
Mm.
constructs. So having a sense of confidence around mathematics did help me kind of look down on computer science in the sense of the problem solving approach and realize, hey, this is it kind of internalized itself way better. So anyway, so yeah, and then I spent my time doing math, and I think that's where I really started to leverage this new mindset that I've been developing, where math was I would say uh, significantly more time intensive than computer science, and especially as like you're in your final years of math and you're going into the courses like advanced calculus and like partial elliptical differential equations and all that stuff, where the teachers are all have their PhD students they're worried about, and they don't even know your name. They just throw you a syllabus and they here are the dates. And as my colleagues kind of were like expecting a good teacher, I was so used to just learning things on my
Right.
own. And I've developed that skill set for already years now, where I started to do better and better and better to the point where I was doing exceptionally well towards the end of my math course. And I realized this is, something that it's valuable here. I need to build on this
Mm.
further. And I would say that even how I operate today is really under that lack of complacency, constantly hungry, always expanding outwards, where I have just a kind of a set of philosophies that I live by, and I'm happy to walk through some of them. But today I do a lot of really technical software development. We do cloud computing. We do some pretty interesting marketing, and we do public relations at a very technical level. So yeah, there's a whole lot going on, and and we build news publications. So much fun stuff where it almost seems like it's chaotic because there's so much being done, but there is a method to the madness. There is a rhythm. There is a, what is that saying? Rhythm to the rhyme. I don't know, possibly, but
Reason,
but
something
uh,
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
something like that. Yes.
So do you
Hopefully,
screen?
hopefully someone in the
Yeah,
comments
exactly.
section can
Do
save
you
us.
screen for ADHD when you hire people at your company?
No, not really. No, no. But hiring is actually one of the hardest things. That's the truth. But so to give you an example of just how I operate, we can talk about hiring in just a moment, and then, but I have like an 80/20 rule where I'm constantly oscillating between research and development, expanding outwards, and then building clients and or maintaining my client base. So there are times where I'll spend 80% of my day literally doing rendering services, doing work, and then 20% of my day I would spend doing kind of
Hmm.
R&D, where seeing where I can inch outwards, offer new services and whatnot. And that's how I spend a majority of my time. But then there are times where I'll kind of flip, and that's an interesting time where I'll spend 80% of my day doing R&D. This is where I grow a beard. I get a lot of energy drinks, and I'm really focused, and I'm in the trenches learning new stuff. I still got to maintain the infrastructure now, but I'm not really looking to grow the company. I'm really looking to grow my skill set. And I really like those times the most because it reminds me of what it's like to be back in school. It reminds me of what it's like to learn so much in a short period of time. And I'm honestly addicted to that
Hmm.
feeling. So, yeah. So, and when it comes to growing the company and hiring, it is a pretty tedious process. A bad case and a good case scenario would be when someone's just not a fit. So the resume doesn't work. The worst case scenario is when you spend 3 weeks training them and then you find out they're not a fit, because there are some things that are extremely hard to vet over paper.
Definitely.
And there's an element of consistency, reliability, especially when you're overseas. Someone can have just really good credentials. Their English can be exceptionally superb and articulate. And they can operate really well for 2 3 weeks. And then, their grandmother's sick or tooth fairy's coming over and they just disappear. And there's ways to test for that, but it's not always perfect. So yeah, hiring can be a little
So
stressful
going
sometimes.
back to, like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is if you could redo your childhood, what would you have done differently? Like with regards to
Ooh.
the ADHD component, I guess, or how it affected your life.
That's a very, very good question. I never actually thought of that. But here's the thing. The things that were my greatest shortcomings and disabilities were the things that forced me to carve the path that gave me an element of growth that I'm grateful
Yeah.
for. So the more I talk about the things I didn't like, the less I understand where I could be today. So that's why it's a bit of a hard question to answer
You wouldn't
because
even be you
I really,
today.
I wouldn't even be me. And, I really rode those silver linings as far as I could. So, but certainly it would be good to have not have to have ADHD. It certainly would have been good to have a better relationship with Ritalin. It certainly would have been good to be more in sync philosophically with the upbringing in a religious Jewish
So
environment.
maybe,
I
yeah,
mean, there's a whole litany
maybe
of
I'll ask
stuff.
like when you have a son one day, God willing, if that's something that you want, and he happens to have ADHD and you find a lot of you in him, how would you
Ah,
raise him? What, you know?
yeah, that's $1 million question. I like your questions. They're really good because they're making me think about stuff that I haven't thought about too much. But the kid part I have thought about a little bit, and I certainly would make sure to listen to the kid. And if there's some deep underlying, let's say he's not happy with the school he's in, or, I wouldn't assume I know
Mm.
better. I would listen to the kid and I would try to give him that sense of, build up his confidence around him doing things he likes doing. I would certainly try to have the kid develop a passion for something specific as early on as possible. So, given that if he has ADHD, or even if he doesn't, but the schooling system is fine, he'll have to go through it, of course, and I think he should. It's super important. I would also want him to learn stuff on the side. And I grew up as a religious kid. I never really did that at all. So it really was just the bare minimums for this in the secular world and nothing else. And I would try to change that certainly. Maybe if he likes doing piano, make sure he does piano lessons 2 or 3 times a week. Teach him multiple languages. That is something I'd certainly love my kid to know. Multiple
Yeah,
languages
that's
gives you
interesting.
access.
So yeah, just like a personal story there. My parents ensured that each of us, the three kids, learned an instrument. And I wouldn't say it was something that I liked doing, but it was something that I had to do. Now that I can play the violin, I'm so grateful. But practicing an hour a day didn't bring me joy. Like one thing that I often think about is my brother is a cellist. He's a professional cellist. But when he started learning the
Oh wow.
cello when he was little, he absolutely hated it, screaming, crying, yelling, the whole nines. I would say most normal parents would kind of throw up their arms and say, "That's it. Like, okay, you don't have to play the cello in the more anymore." My mom was not that parent, and I mean, thank goodness for that because now it's basically his whole life. It's what he lives for. So, one
Right.
question that I have, I mean, I don't know who can answer it, but it's like, how far is too far? Like, when does it become traumatizing to keep the
Right.
kid playing the instrument, and when does it become for their benefit? Which is quite a different conversation, but you made me think of that.
Right. No, it definitely is an art and a science form there where you want to surround the kid with things that can truly benefit them in the long run. And then this is where the becomes the job of a good parent to help them see the value in why you're asking them to do these things. And also the fact that they understand that you give them freedom as much as you can, that they learn to trust you and they trust your intuition and they know that you truly do have the best intentions towards them, I think would make it easier for you to convey that effectively. But I certainly agree. And learning the cello, playing piano, that literally is learning another
Hmm.
language. It's a form of communication.
Absolutely.
learning how to learning how to program is a form of communication, and learning Spanish or French is a form of communication. And they're all languages that tap into unique networks within the brain, but they also give you just a larger, you have a broader reach of things and people you can communicate with, which is just absolutely amazing. Yeah. And in terms of, specifically, if my kid, I'm happy to put my kid in religious Jewish school. I think there's so much beauty in there. But if the kid is not happy with a specific school or wants a specific change, I'm going to put more value into what he wants because I do think that that will give him a healthier
Hmm.
upbringing.
So, Michael, if this is your soapbox, like why did you tell us this story or this journey of yours through kind of accepting your ADHD, learning to excel within it, finding those silver linings, and then getting to where you are now?
Well, I'm really grateful for it, to be honest with you. And I would say I had an exceptionally good upbringing. I had exceptionally good parents. I have exceptionally good parents. Um, and I'm honestly nothing but grateful for that. Now, I never really looked at having ADHD as kind of something that, I can look back on and be like, oh, I had it so hard. But I do think talking about it's important because whether it's ADHD or a million other problems you might have growing up, it's important to realize that you have two choices and no one else can make that choice for you. You can either label yourself as disabled or unlucky and go about your life operating under that premise where every time you feel challenges in life, you say, it's not my fault, it must be easier for other people. Or you can get aggressive and innovative and weaponize your disabilities and weaponize your shortcomings and learn how to use them effectively to kind of create a uniqueness factor that once you do find a way to operate, whether it be economically or otherwise, you can offer something to the world that other people
Mm.
can't. So, and no one else will help you make that decision. That comes from within.
I
It
have
really
to tell
does.
you so I recently started my business full time as a ghostwriter, and I was talking about the decision months ago with my therapist, and I ended up, from our conversation, I ended up writing an article called "My Therapist Says I'm Not Cut Out to Be an Entrepreneur." And it was all about kind of like my tendency to be anxious and et cetera, et cetera. And from that article where of course I was like, oh, but I'll find it as my strength, blah blah blah. A lot of people actually resonated with that. A lot of women specifically
Yeah.
actually really felt like they've had to go through the same things, kind of harnessing their so-called weaknesses or fallbacks as part of how they do business, which it sounds like that's what you're doing too.
Right. Right. And here's what I would, just to give you a broad answer to that point, or just to add to that point broadly, I wouldn't take advice on fitness from someone who's not fit. I wouldn't take advice. So, and those are the ones who are the most likely to give you their opinion. So, if someone has, a corporate job, which I'm not, and maybe it's a bad parallel here because there truly is nothing wrong with a corporate job. It's absolutely great. But, you know, they're giving you, they may even have good intentions towards you and they're authentic and they're genuine in terms of what they're telling you. But it's a little, they found success in a different vertical. So if they're in a corporate setting, they might not necessarily understand the nuances of finding you success outside of that and building something on you completely on your own. So it's important to understand the context in which you generally get advice from. And what is it? What is the criteria to be an entrepreneur? It's just saying, "Fuck it, I'm going to build my own." I'm willing to take a hit for 3, 4, 5 years. I'm willing to subscribe to different, um, a different function of growth as opposed to finding a bureaucratic company growing in a linear fashion and tapering off at the top. Maybe I'm going to take an exponential curve where I make very little in the beginning and I put so much effort in, and then eventually I get that inflection point, and then I start to see that success after 4 or 5 years of nothing but grit and persistence and stubbornness where it's needed. So each their own. And by the way, being an entrepreneur is not necessarily better than working for a company. It all comes down to what makes you happy.
Definitely. Well, Michael, thanks for joining me today and sharing your story. Really good to get to know you a little bit more, and hopefully we can just continue sharing stories in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dina. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, we did it. My computer didn't die.
Yes,
It did get very dark here, but
it's okay.